With Super Tuesday tomorrow, this morning, the U.S. Supreme Court's unanimous decision that that individual states may not unilaterally disqualify former President Donald Trump from their presidential ballots is a big decision. This decision stops the efforts by Colorado, Maine, and other states to keep former President Trump off the ballot. And it comes at a time when multiple national polls indicate the former president holds the lead in crucial swing states amid deep dissatisfaction with President Biden and his administration. Join me now to discuss this and much more is Congressman Kevin Hern. He serves on the House Ways and Means Committee and is the chairman of the Republican Study Committee. He represents the 1st Congressional District of Oklahoma. Congressman Hern, welcome back to the program. Great to see you.
Tony, it's great to be with you.
Before we jump into China, which is what I want to talk with you about, your reaction to the Supreme Court decision today?
Well, I think what the president said, President Trump said, was exactly right. A state, a group of people can't just arbitrarily keep somebody off the ballot because they don't like our politics. The Supreme Court, certainly a unanimous decision. Well, you had 3 of them that didn't agree with the majority ruling, but they still said it was unconstitutional what happened in Colorado and what's happened in Illinois, attempting there, and certainly in Maine. And we're going to have a free and fair election, it looks like. And so we need to, we continue to say, great job, Supreme Court.
Yes, the lawfare aspect of the challenges by the left toward Donald Trump, at least as it comes to the ballot, have ended. But I'm sure the left is going to continue to try to keep either voters from voting from him or keep him in court to try to keep him distracted.
Well, you're already seeing members of Congress, Swalwell and others, that are trying to get Donald Trump off the ballots across America, which is really sad to see that they are so fearful that Joe Biden is going to lose. They're going to do anything they can to remove his competition. And as much as Nikki Haley would like to think that she's competitive in this race, she's not, and she needs to move aside and let this race become the 2-person race that it should be.
So, Congressman Hern, let's talk about one of these big issues facing the country that often get lost in the day-to-day politics, and that is the issue of China. Last week, House Republicans, under your leadership in the Republican Study Committee, introduced the Countering Communist China Act. Now, this is billed as the strongest anti-Chinese Communist Party legislation in history of the Congress. Let's talk about why it's necessary and what it would do.
Well, certainly when you see what China is doing, their economic prowess. So our GDP is 23 trillion. Theirs is approaching 18 trillion. Third place is 4 trillion, which is Germany and Japan. So they're neck and neck at third place, but not even close. And when you see, we've become kind of comfortable with the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean as sort of our barriers. But certainly what they're doing in South America, they're building major infrastructure projects, taking over South America, moving up through Panama, Honduras, Ecuador, all through the South American continent. And then when we're seeing fentanyl come across our southern border, that all the precursors are coming from China and being manufactured in Mexico. Fentanyl is not flowing south. It's not flowing to Europe, or it's not flowing to Asia. It's coming into the United States of America to kill people. When you look at what's happening with the human rights violations with the Muslim Uyghurs, 1 million, and all the genital mutilations that are going on, slave labor. There's many things that we found out during COVID that 90% of our active ingredients for our medicines are made in China, sourced from China. When you look at trade policies, certainly not fair at all. You heard the one gentleman was talking to Maria that said, it's insane what we're seeing with TikTok. They're collecting our data, and we've got to stop that. So this bill attacks every one of those issues and more.
Congressman Hern, as I've read through the legislation and, of course, your statements and our conversations we've had about this as well, this approaches China as America's greatest adversary, a threat to our sovereignty. This juxtaposed to the Biden administration that just says, we don't want conflict with China. We just want fair competition. How can you have both?
Well, certainly China doesn't look at it that way. I think people mistake that Xi Jinping is the president of China. His official title is the General Secretary of the Communist Chinese People. And so he's a communist, certainly different than Russia in the sense that they have the economic prowess to do what they need to do. They have the military prowess to do what they need to do. They're talking about a 500 ship military navy by 2030, and we're going to be about 300 ships. We know that they're marching around and around Taiwan to try to clear off any of the Western nations. And then again, as I mentioned, what they're doing economically through South America, and they're trying to avoid a lot of our trade sanctions by going to Cambodia and Vietnam and setting up companies there that are funded by China. There's not a company in China that's not owned by China, and so it's different than us competing in the free marketplace.
Let's talk about how they're getting a foothold with young people. Peter Schweitzer was talking just a moment ago, that clip I played about TikTok and how that is connected to the Chinese Communist Party and the military. How does this address what China is trying to do, kind of what we would describe maybe as a soft invasion of our country?
Well, certainly they're doing things like TikTok where they're collecting data, and children today, kids today, I'd say middle-aged people, pretty much all Americans, even the President Biden has a TikTok account. When you're looking at what they're doing to find out the moves you're making, what interests you, it gives them the ability to attack you on many fronts. When we look at the Confucius Institutes that have been in our universities in the United States for a decade or more, when you look at what they're doing in our K through 12s, trying to say we're here to culturally educate Americans on what China is, but basically it's indoctrination. And even the Democrat Party has pushed back on this narrative. The former Speaker McCarthy, tried in 2019 to get a joint committee. We were in the minority then. Speaker Pelosi, leader of the House, did not want to do it. She didn't see China as a threat. And a year ago, when we became in the majority in 2022, Speaker McCarthy set this up, a bipartisan approach where there are a lot of Democrats on the committee as well, chaired by Mike Gallagher, to come forward. And it's yielded a lot of information. We've taken the task of going and creating this China bill, what's happening with China, what they're doing to us as Americans, and we need to push back. We need to become smarter than what we've been in the recent years.
This legislation would allow the U.S. government to do what?
Will certainly be punitive toward and create sanctions if we don't reduce the fentanyl deaths by 98%. It would sanction companies. It would sanction individual Chinese bureaucrats, company leaders across the world where we have the ability to do so. It would go directly at the financial institutions that China is using to fund these different programs they're doing across not only the United States, but certainly the Western nations.
Final question for you, Congressman Kevin Hern. Consumers in America have a role to play in this as well. I mean, we're fueling, in many ways, this Chinese engine, as you said, they're approaching $18 trillion in their GDP.
Well, China is our largest trading partner, and we are their largest trading partner. The only reason they have a foothold in America is because consumers in America are wanting cheaper products, and China's been delivering that. And President Trump pointed that out with creating tariffs to give our manufacturers in America the foothold, the necessary opening to create products here that consumers want. And we need to listen to that. I think it will be a different relationship. I know it will be under President Trump, and it's been under President Biden.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that front. It'll be different in a lot of ways. Congressman Kevin Hern, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll be tracking very closely this piece of legislation.
Thanks, Tony.